You've probably heard of it. It's one of the biggest personal finance books on the planet. And it kicks off not with budgets or spreadsheets, but with a really simple, really powerful story. Today, we're getting into the ideas at the absolute core of Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So, the entire book is framed around these lessons Kiyosaki learned from two dads in his life. You've got his actual father, a super educated guy he calls his poor dad, and then you have his best friend's dad, an entrepreneur who dropped out in the 8th grade, who he calls his rich dad.
And believe me, their views on money couldn't have been more different. Poor Dad, he was a brilliant academic, but even with a good salary, he struggled with money his entire life. Rich Dad, on the other hand, all street smarts, he became one of the richest men in Hawaii. Just look at their advice. Poor Dad would say, work for a company. Rich Dad said, no, buy the company. Poor Dad thought money was the root of all evil. Rich Dad's take, the lack of money is the root of all evil.
So, this created this huge question for a young Kiyosaki, and it's the very same question we're going to answer today. What was that fundamental difference in their thinking that led to such completely different lives? Well, it all starts with a trap. You know, all that classic advice from Poor Dad. Go to school, get good grades, find a safe job. I mean, it sounds like the responsible thing to do, right? But Kiyosaki says that path leads you straight into something he calls the rat race. And it's a pattern that looks totally normal from the outside, but is incredibly hard to break out of. So, what exactly is the rat race? Well, Kiyosaki says it's this endless loop. You get up, you go to work to get a paycheck, and then that whole paycheck goes right back out to pay your bills. And the whole thing is powered by two really basic human emotions: the fear of not having any money and the desire for all the cool stuff money can buy. And here's what that cycle looks like in action. First, you get a job, mostly out of fear of being broke. Then desire starts to creep in. You know, you want a nicer car, a bigger place, so your spending goes up, which usually leads to more debt. So what do? You've got to work even harder, chase that raise, just to keep your head above water. But then more money comes in, and it just flows right back out. The wheel just keeps on spinning. All right, so how do you stop the wheel? For Kiyosaki, the first big lesson came when he was just 9 years old. He went to his rich dad and asked him to teach him how to get rich. And what he got was, well, it was a very unexpected, very hands-on education. So, Rich Dad's first offer was this. Sure, I'll teach you, but you have to come work for me. The pay? 10 cents an hour. And look, even for 1956, that was basically nothing. The job itself was mind-numbingly boring. He was just dusting canned goods for 3 hours every single Saturday. So after a few weeks of this, young Kiyosaki was completely fed up. He felt used, he felt like he'd been tricked, and he was ready to walk. So he marches into Rich Dad's office and just lets him have it, basically calling him a greedy cheat who broke his promise. And Rich Dad's response, this is the first huge turning point. He just calmly explains that he is teaching him. He's giving him a taste of what real life is like. That feeling of frustration, of being underpaid and totally unappreciated, that was the lesson. He said, that's life, pushing you around, trying to get you to wake up. And then came the real kicker. Rich Dad says, okay, now get back to work, but this time I'm not paying you anything. He took away the 10 cents an hour. The whole point was to force Kiyosaki to stop thinking about just trading his time for a few dimes and start looking for opportunities that everyone else was missing. Now, obviously, this wasn't about cheap labor. It was a real world class in how money messes with your head. The entire experiment was designed to make Kiyosaki face the two big emotions that keep most adults stuck: fear and what he calls desire or greed. Let's just break this down for a second. On one side, you have fear. You know, the fear of not being able to pay your bills, the fear of getting fired. That's the thing that shoves most people out the door in the morning to a job they might not even like. And on the other side, you have desire. That's the dream of the new iPhone, the amazing vacation, the better life. That's the carrot that keeps you chasing that next paycheck. So here's the trap in a nutshell. Fear is pushing you from behind, and desire is pulling you from the front. And when you're caught in the middle of that, it's your emotions that are in the driver's seat, not your logical brain. You just react instead of actually thinking. And that emotional reaction, that's the engine that keeps the rat race going. Rich Dad's lesson really forces us to look in the mirror and ask that same question. When you think about your career, your money, are you making strategic, logical choices? Or are you just reacting to the fear of being broke and the desire for more stuff? Okay, so if reacting with your emotions is the trap, what's the way out? This brings us to probably the single most important idea in the entire book. It's the fundamental shift in mindset that separates the rich from pretty much everyone else. As Rich Dad explains it, most people just want to play it safe. And that's because they're being driven by fear. They take the secure job with a steady paycheck because they're terrified of taking a risk. But getting out of the rat race, that takes passion. It takes a real desire to learn. It means you have to master your fear instead of letting it be your boss. This right here, this is the poor dad mindset. It's the idea that your time and your work is what you trade for dollars. You are the engine that makes the income. So if you stop working, guess what? The money stops too. And now, this is the rich dad mindset. See, the goal isn't to just work harder to make more money. The goal is to buy things, assets, like businesses or real estate or stocks that make money for you, whether you're working or not. Your money becomes your employee. It works for you 24/7 to make you even more money. So let's just wrap this all up. What are the big takeaways here? First, that for most of us, our financial lives are controlled by fear and desire. Second, that this emotional roller coaster creates the rat race, where we just work to pay bills. Third, the only way to escape is to start thinking with your head, not just reacting with your gut. And finally, the ultimate goal is that massive paradigm shift. Stop working for your money and start making your money work for you. Rich Dad always said that a job is just a short-term fix for what is a lifelong problem, needing income. It takes care of this month's bills, sure, but what about next year's? Or the bills 10 years from now? So the book leaves us all with a pretty big challenge. If you can see the trap, what are you building as your own long-term solution?